Once upon a time in a faraway land, there was a handsome prince who lived in a magnificent castle. He had everything he could ever want, but he was lonely. The prince longed for true love, but how would he find a real princess? One day, the prince decided to leave the castle and go out into the world to find a princess to marry. So he set off on a 3D animated journey across many kingdoms. On his travels, he saw many beautiful princesses, but none of them felt right. Some were too vain, others too bossy, and some just didn't make him feel the way he thought a princess should. But the prince kept searching, hoping to find his true love someday. As the sun set over the horizon, the prince continued his journey until he came across a towering oak tree. The branches of the tree seemed to form a protective circle round him, inviting him to rest for the night. As he settled down at the base of the tree, the prince closed his eyes, dreaming of a cozy fire and a soft bed. Suddenly, the ground began to shake and the sky crackled with lightning. It was the worst storm he'd ever seen. Thunder roared and rain poured from the sky. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, making the prince's hair stand on end. Just when he thought it couldn't get any worse, a loud knock echoed through the forest. The prince jumped and turned towards the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. There, standing in front of him, was a girl in a tattered dress and muddy boots. Her hair was soaked and plastered to her head, and she was shivering uncontrollably. "Please," she cried, "I know it's a terrible night, but may I seek shelter in your castle?" The prince looked at the girl, her desperate plea echoing in his ears. Despite his own fear, he knew he had to help her. Guiding her towards his castle, the prince felt a sense of responsibility wash over him. He had to protect her. He led her inside and closed the door behind her. As the storm raged outside, the girl and the prince sat by the fire, sipping hot chocolate. She told him her name was Ella, and that she was a princess who had run away from home. The prince was intrigued, but he couldn't help but wonder if she was telling the truth. Just then, the girl's eyes widened, and she exclaimed, "Oh dear! I promised my coachman I'd return before the king's guards arrived." Looking at her worried face, the prince knew he had to help her escape the guards. Together they devised a plan. He would sneak her out of the castle through a secret passageway. Once they were safely outside, the prince led Ella to a magnificent white horse. "Take this," he said, handing her a bridle. "It will take you back home." Ella took the bridle, her fingers brushing against the prince's. And with a final wave, she mounted the horse and rode away. The prince watched her go, a strange feeling in his heart. He knew he had to find her and bring her back. He rushed back to the castle and burst through the doors. "Mother," he cried, "I need your help." The queen looked up from her embroidery, her eyes filled with concern. She listened patiently as the prince explained what had happened. When he finished, the queen nodded understandingly. "Don't worry, my son," she said. "I think I know just what to do." The queen led the prince to a small cottage in the castle grounds. Inside, she handed him a large needle and some colorful thread. "Go on," she said with a smile. "Make yourself comfortable." The prince looked at the needle and thread, confused, but he trusted his mother's judgment and started to sew. When Ella returned to the castle, the prince was nowhere to be found. Disappointed, she went to the queen, who greeted her warmly. "Ah, you're back," she said, leading Ella to a chair. "Why don't you rest here for a moment?" The queen handed Ella a stack of colorful fabrics, each one more beautiful than the last. "Pick whichever one you like best," she said. "It will make a lovely cushion for your horse." Overjoyed, Ella began to sort through the fabrics, her mind off the troubles she had endured that night. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the room, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. The prince entered, his face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Mother," he cried, "I have made a terrible mistake. I have offended a princess, and she is now in great danger." The queen looked at her son, her expression softening with understanding. "Don't worry, my love," she said, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We will fix this." She turned to Ella and said, "My dear, would you like some company?" Ella, still shaken from her encounter with the prince, hesitated for a moment before accepting the offer. As the two women sat together, the queen began to tell Ella a story about a handsome prince who had been cursed to live as an animal until someone showed him kindness. Ella listened intently, her mind wandering to the mysterious prince. Ella decided to visit the prince and see how he was doing. Upon arriving at his chambers, she knocked softly on the door. A moment later, the door swung open, and there stood the most beautiful creature Ella had ever seen. It was a lion. "Come in," the lion said in a deep voice. Ella stepped inside and gasped. The room was filled with all sorts of wild animals, each more majestic than the last. A tiger lounged gracefully on a nearby rug, while a pair of peacocks strutted proudly in the corner. In the center of the room, Ella saw the missing piece of the puzzle, the prince. He was sitting on a throne, his eyes downcast. As Ella approached, the animals parted, creating a path for her to walk down. "I am sorry for how I acted earlier," the prince said, his voice filled with remorse. "Will you forgive me?" Ella nodded, her heart filled with understanding. In that moment, the curse was broken and the prince was transformed back into a human. He stood before her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered, taking her hands in his. "You have no idea what this means to me." And so the prince and princess lived happily ever after. They ruled the kingdom with kindness and wisdom, and their love for each other only grew stronger with time. The end. Remember, true love sees beyond appearances.